an easy thing to do. I think what I suppose I'm saying is that it was an eventuality that was prepared for. But that there was a concern that reconstruction itself and the consequences of the loss of law and order, as you describe it, was not fully appreciated. Is that a fair criticism of what happened?
I think there were... I've told you about Andrew Natsios saying that was the greatest danger and the thing he feared most. There was the catastrophic success scenario in planning papers. But then the Pentagon, I think, believed its own propaganda and thought the people of Iraq who hated the regime, and it was a hateful regime, of course, would be giving flowers to the soldiers, and they really believed their own propaganda and thought they could come out very quickly and that everything would be easy. And that's why they threw away the State Department stuff. And I mean, I later wrote the project for the New American Century documents, and clearly it was a long-standing view of theirs. And they were wrong, but that's why we got the problem. Because the people who are now in charge, both militarily and for reconstruction, absolutely believed they'd be welcomed and there wouldn't be any trouble.
At the time, when you're writing this, and obviously you're writing at a time when there was still considerable hope and expectation of a second UN resolution, your hope was that the UN would be able to handle this range of problems, that they'd be able to take a leading role in reconstruction.
Well, this is the second UN resolution, well, no, the third, however many, because we had to have oil for food resolutions as well. But this is the question of the legalities of reconstruction. Yeah. It's the same question that the International Court of Justice gave a judgment on in the Palestinian occupied territories. So an occupying power is required to keep order, provide for humanitarian needs, and is not allowed to change the institutions of the country they occupy or its laws. So we knew that if we didn't get another UN resolution, we were in big trouble. We could do humanitarian, but you can't reconstruct the country. And that became an absolute obsession of Whitehall. It wasn't just my department. If you look at the files, there's endless Foreign Office efforts, and David Manning to Condi Rice and da-di-da. And of course, the group in the US administration that had won and taken over OHA hated the UN, didn't care about international law. So this, and I think Jack Straw was getting frantic because here's another UN resolution that we might all fall out about. And then there were opinions by the Attorney General saying if any Brits went into OHA, there's certain things they could do and not do because of the law, because of the Geneva Convention.
I mean, this is obviously getting to the post-war situation. I'm just trying to clarify the lines you were taking before the war, where there's a considerable stress in your letters and those coming from your department on the UN role. And then at the end of this letter of the 14th of February, when you're talking about the humanitarian risks, you make an important point about your budget. You say, my department has tight budgetary constraints. We have major humanitarian disasters across the world and my resources are stretched. I'm happy to prioritize Iraq from my contingency reserve, but I cannot take resources from other poor and needy people to assist post-conflict Iraq. Without some understanding on finance, I cannot responsibly commit DFID to the exemplary partnership with MOD, which we discussed. I'm interested to know, first, what sort of resources you were after at this stage, and you say you copied this letter to Gordon Brown. What sort of response you got on that particular request?
Well, there was this talk of an exemplary role. It was rather late that Britain was taking on the South, because at first there was the plan to go through Turkey.
North, yes.
And then there was some, I think, it's fairly late on, but I think Tony Blair convened a meeting and Gordon Brown was there and Jack Straw and I about the post-invasion plans, and this exemplary role phrase came up. And we were up for it. I mean, if you can make the South really go beautifully, that's good for the country and everything else, as well as Britain's reputation. But then I had written a number of letters saying, all we've got is our contingency reserve, and I am supposed to keep that for other emergencies in the world, and we're, you know, coming to the end of one financial year and into the other. I mean, if we mean this, there's got to be some money on the table. And what we were getting from the Treasury was no answer, nothing. And it was this period of standoff. Gordon Brown was pushed out and marginalised at the time. And having cups of coffee with me and saying Tony Blair's obsessed with his legacy and he thinks he can have a quick war and then a reshuffle, etc. But then, so after a lot of delay and a number of efforts, the Treasury set up some kind of working group, this will be in the papers, and came with a letter saying there's no money, money's very tight, and therefore we've got to have a UN resolution so we can get the World Bank and the IMF and all the others in. That was a Treasury response. And we only got any extra money from the Treasury, I think, after the invasion had started. So how you can plan an exemplary role when it's that late is impossible.
So I'm just... Again, this is... And
there's one other thing, sorry,
yes,
on this. At some point, my officials suggested that we send a couple of officials into Orha. Was it into Orha? Or maybe with our military for the South. And I said we should go on a scoping mission, but we shouldn't put people in because it was to promise what we couldn't deliver because we didn't have the money. And if I put people there as though we were going to bring lots of money, that was misleading. So we sent a scoping mission, but we didn't put people... I can't now remember. I think it probably was inside the military planning rather than Orha. Because we had nothing, no answer. And there's Tony Blair's getting all these letters and copies to Gordon Brown. It's just part of the dysfunctional nature of the way the government was operating.
So, as far as you're aware, you sent off this letter on the 14th of February. You're not aware of a response?
I sent a number of letters about money.
Indeed, yes.
Well, the response we got in the end was from Paul Boateng after the invasion had started.
And that's really...
And prior to that, we got the result of this working group, or whatever it was called, saying there's no money. And that's why we've got to have a UN resolution for reconstruction so we can get the IMF, the World Bank.
So, from that point of view, we were taking on a potentially exemplary role. But when you'd asked for more resource prior to the war to support this exemplary role, you hadn't been given any promise of extra funds?
No, so there was no reply to a lot of letters, and then there was that Treasury working group saying no, really.